We've been talking about the cycle of loving your neighbors, which is the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbors as yourself. I don't think I need this stool. And then to move people to loving God, teaching people who God is, teaching people to fall in love with God, showing people how to worship God. I love just listening to the singing this morning, being able to lift up our voices and sing together. There's something very pure about a cappella music. It's just really, in its purest sense, I feel very connected to it. And it's great to love God and to worship God and to live our lives to please Him. And then moving people and moving each other to serving others. If we're not putting our faith into action, James says that your faith is dead. And then repeating that cycle. Our theme this year is straining toward the goal. Our theme verse is Philippians 3, verses 13 and 14. Brothers, I do not consider that I've made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. There's one thing that we all share together in this world, and that is pain and suffering. It's the one thing that none of us will escape. It's the one thing that every single person on planet Earth shares at some point. We will suffer. And Paul talks about straining toward that goal, and I love the realness of that passage and the authenticity of Paul saying it's not going to be this easy road. It's not going to be that you put your faith in Jesus, then all of a sudden everything's great and life is just going to work for you. It's just going to connect and you'll breathe success. Paul doesn't say that. He says he himself has to forget what lies behind. Do any of us ever feel that way? That sometimes we want to forget what lies behind. We want to forget the bad times, the bad decisions we've made, the times that we've been hurt, the times that people have disappointed us, the times that we've struggled in every different area. We want to forget those things. And Paul says, I strain forward to what lies ahead. It's going to be a struggle. And he presses toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ. Cameron just read for us these two verses from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Now, that doesn't mean He removes all of the struggles and all the bad things that are going to happen in your life. It means that God will make a straight path in your life toward that goal. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like sometimes I'm like this schizophrenic person who's so jumbled in my own head and trying to figure things out, and trying to respond to things and trying to respond to people and trying to pack all these things into life and still be a good husband and be a good father and be a good Christian and be a good leader and be, and I feel like I'm swerving a lot. And Paul is so mission focused on that goal, on getting to heaven, that he says, I have to forget all these things and I strain toward that goal. And God is making a straight path for us because when we rely on our own understanding, this is what we do. I always think about Route 30. Route 30 is just a terrible road. I was at camp yesterday I took Eden and Dakota and Sophie and Xander. We went out to Douglasville, 3.5 hours away. And I was talking to Jonathan Goodall, a good friend of mine, Jonathan Woodall. Eden, you wrecked my... Eden calls him Jane Goodall. Jonathan Woodall, who also is a preacher in Eastern Pennsylvania, good friend of mine. We went to grad school together. He was joking and he was like, hey, you taking Route 30 all the way home? And I was like, I don't think so. When Natalie's dad comes here, a lot of times he'll complain about these roads. He's like, Michigan, great. Ohio, great. Pennsylvania, I get to these dumb roads, and why do they make them so windy? They go like this, and they're up and down, and our roads are crazy around here, right? And when we're relying on our own understanding, this is typically how our lives pan out. It's just a mess. I want to read a couple statistics, and you'll see how this ties in. But this is alarming to me. It's the American debt, personal debt. This is from Business Insider. I just printed this off, hot off the press this morning. The title is The Average American Debt in 2024, Household Debt Statistics. The average debt in America is $104,215 per family. Across mortgages, auto loans, student loans, and credit cards. That doesn't include medical debt. That doesn't include all kinds of other debt. This is just mortgages, auto loans, student loans, and credit cards. $104,215 per American family. The average debt an American owes is $104,215 across mortgage loans, home equity, lines of credit, auto loans, credit card debt, student loan debt, and other debts like personal loans. Data from Experian breaks down the average debt a consumer holds based on type, age, credit score, and state. Then it goes on to say that the debt peaks in the age group of, it's like my age group, and basically your mid-40s into your early 50s is when people have the most amount of debt. That's alarming to me. Another note here, the household debt in the U.S. is $17.5 trillion as of the fourth quarter of 2023, a $210 billion increase since the third quarter of 2023. So in one quarter, we've increased our debt as individuals, $210 billion. In 4 months, that's impressive, and not in a good way. And I say this to say that when we're walking by, today's lesson, by the way, is we walk by faith, not by sight. When we walk by sight, in other words, by what we see, what we perceive, what we see other people doing, when we walk by sight, our life tends to fall apart pretty quickly. And we get caught in these traps of saying, well, most people are doing, most people buy cars, buy cars with loans. Most people buy houses, and kind of extend themselves, but that's what, just extend it 30 years. And, instead of paying off in 15 years, we'll just double that so that we're literally paying until retirement age. And on and on and on it goes. And in trading, whether you're trading the stock market or foreign exchange currencies or commodities, there's what's called retail sentiment. And that's, what are the masses doing? Which are they taking a position long, or are they taking a position short? Are they buying, or are they selling? And there are people who trade based on retail sentiment because the vast majority of people lose money. The vast majority of people who trade. And so there are people who will take the retail sentiment, whatever the masses are doing, whatever the most percentage of people are doing, whatever that position is, they'll trade in the opposite direction. And typically, when you trade opposite the masses, you do quite well. And it's really interesting. Right? We all have heard Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yet we still get caught in this mentality. If we just follow what other people are doing, look at what all these people are doing and look how wonderful it is, and this can be applied to Christianity, certainly. Look at what the majority of Christians are doing, and look how wonderful, and the churches have this and that and this and all these bells and whistles, and if we just do that and kind of mimic what this other church is doing, then it's going to work great and we're going to grow, and so people are falling into these traps. of not walking by faith, but walking by sight. What they see is what they replicate. This is typical human psychology. I'm a big fan of Apollo Robbins. I've mentioned him here before, but I use one of his videos in my trainings on abuse in the church. And Apollo Robbins he's an entertainer. He's a pickpocket. And he's a pickpocket entertainer, not a pickpocket by profession. We'll clear that up. But what's fascinating is he tells people before he pulls them on stage, I'm going to pick your pockets clean. I'm going to remove everything from your pockets. And they don't believe him. Why? Because we have this perception, all of us do to an extent, that what we see is what we do. Right? It's based on what we see. It's not based on faith. It's based on what we see and what we acknowledge. And so we tell ourselves that, well, I've never been robbed before and I'm a pretty perceptive person and I would know if somebody is picking my pockets clean. Well, guess what? Every single person who he pulls on stage, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter their level of education, it doesn't matter their socioeconomic level, he picks their pockets clean. And when this is our mentality that I'm gonna do what I see, right? What I see, what I observe, I'm gonna behave in response to that. It typically falls apart and we have a series of unfortunate, costly mistakes. I have a friend of mine who a few years ago, his wife was fooled by one of these online scams. They ended up losing, pretty much everything, to the point where they both were seeing a psychologist to cope with the aftermath of all of their losses. They're not dumb people. I wouldn't consider them vulnerable people. But they both probably, if they would admit it, would say, well, we're pretty perceptive people, and I would know if I was being scammed. Like typically we think older people, right? They're pretty big targets for the phone scams and online scams. And so people our age and younger are typically like, well, I'm not going to fall prey to scams. Well, there's a new scam out right now. This is pretty recent, within the last few months. It's an artificial intelligence scam where people will take a few minutes of a voice recording. They can find voice recordings of your kid from online. So the more we post online, the more AI can learn. And it will take a few minutes of your kid's voice. It'll analyze it and be able to mimic perfectly your kid's voice for like a super deep fake audio. And so they'll call the parents, but it'll be your child who's calling and screaming and saying that they were just kidnapped and that their phone got smashed, and it's your kid. And they said you will not be able to distinguish artificial intelligence voice versus your kid's own voice. And of course, there's a timeline. If you don't give money right now, your child's, whatever, something bad's going to happen. But it's your actual child. People think they're actually talking to their child. And this is happening by the thousands right now. And I think it's going to really ramp up the better AI gets. I think these kinds of scams are going to ramp up, where it's no longer, feels like a sleazy kind of scam. These are legitimate, really good computer-generated scams. There is, you all know there's a black box in our cars. Everybody know that? Everything's being tracked. I'm not trying to make you paranoid. It's for accidents. If you get in an accident, it records everything. It records the amount of pressure that your foot has on the accelerator, the amount of pressure per pound square inch that you put on the brake pedal. It records your steering. Now all the steering is it's electronic. You no longer have power steering pumps, and that's like antiquated technology. Your power steering is all computers. It's all electric motors and electric motor assist. But anyway, all that stuff is being recorded. I mean, literally, every movement on your wheel is being recorded. They can record the amount of pressure that your hands have on the wheel. It's all being recorded to your car's computer. My question is, what if we could record every decision that we ever made based not on faith, but based on what we see and know as Christians and what we perceive, and we react or respond to those things? What if we could record every decision that we've ever made? Would anybody want to see that data? Just show of hands if anybody would want to see that. I wouldn't want to see mine. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to put it out there. Another question, would you be proud of the path that you've taken in your Christian walk? And would you be proud of the decisions that you've made? I mean, it's a fair question. And again, I'm not asking for a show of hands. Self-reflection here. Would you be proud of the decisions that you've made? Another question, would you be proud of the decisions that you're making right now? You see, when we walk by sight instead of walking by faith, that path that Paul says I'm straining toward that goal, that path becomes so blurred and so crooked and so helter-skelter that you don't know if you're going up or you're going down or left or right. And it's like walking in the middle of a forest where you kind of get off the beaten path, and after a while you just sit down because you have no idea where you are. And I feel like so many Christians are living their life that way, where they're just floundering and they're trying to figure it out, and society is not helping us. There are so many cultural wars going on right now, and our attention's being drawn in all these different directions. And I want you to listen carefully to what Paul says here to the church in Corinth. I absolutely love this passage because it eliminates all the white noise. It eliminates all the buzz and all the stuff that's going on in the world and all the things that we get distracted by, and we're like squirrels, chasing our own tails and zigzagging all over the place. Paul lays it out so simply. Here's what he says. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home, he's talking about physical body, right? If we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan. Does that resonate with anybody? Does anybody ever just sit down and be like, I wish I could just hit a reset button and start over? You ever have a day where you just literally put yourself to bed? I'm not talking figuratively. I mean, you ever have days where you just say, I don't even want to think about dinner. I'm going to bed. Paul says, in this tent we groan, longing to put on our heavenly dwelling. If indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked. And he's talking about being stripped of everything. We long to put that heavenly body on as long as we're not stripped bare and just left hopeless again. For while we are still in this tent, we groan, being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has separated us for this very thing is God, prepared us. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So we are always of good courage. We know that while we're at home in the body, we're away from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. I love those two verses. We know it. We're confident of it. We know that the suffering while we're here on earth is temporary. We know that heaven waits for us. We know that that goal is worth straining toward. We know these things because we have faith. And he says, yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we're at home or away, we make it our aim to please him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. You remember the black box I told you about? Everything's being recorded. By the way, just as an FYI, if you go out and there's a death, you're in a car accident and there's a death, automatically your car's black box gets retrieved by police, typically state police, as they investigate the cause of the death, the cause of that accident. Kind of makes you think when you're driving down the road. Makes you think about every decision you make. And Paul says we all, whether you're a Christian or not, all of us are going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. This is why it's important for Paul to strain toward that goal and to forget about everything that lies behind. Paul's not getting caught up in all these dumb arguments. Paul's not chasing his own tail. He's not getting caught up in cultural wars. He's not getting caught up in political arguments, and he's not marching to the doorsteps of Rome and picketing the lines. And Paul's not worried about those things. He's not concerned about those things. He's concerned about, as Kelly said in class, doing what's right always. James says this about our faith. Again, it's not about what we see. It's not about responding to what's going on in current cultures. It's not about, building the biggest, best church and being the biggest, best Christian and, being whatever it is, having the best programs and drawing people. That's not what any of these writers in the Bible are concerned with. They're concerned with living out their faith and trusting God, that when we die, we are certain where we're going. James, by the way, writes us all in the context of suffering. His whole book is written in the context of Christians who are suffering. He says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord." That's a harsh statement. You want to ask something from God? James says you better back it with faith. You better believe that God will do this, that God will deliver, that God will take care of you, that God will meet your needs, because the person who suppresses that, who doesn't believe, who doesn't have the faith, shouldn't suppose that he'll get anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Listen to the importance of faith in our life right now. This is current, right now, 2024, the end of April. We're almost moving into May. Right now, Everything in your life hinges on your faith. Do you believe that what God says is true, or are you going to spend your life responding to what you see? There's a difference. Are we going to spend our lives with knee-jerk reactions as Christians? How many times do we see Christians that have these knee-jerk reactions to all kinds of different things? Somebody makes them mad. I'm leaving the church. Somebody faces a tragedy in their life. God's not real. Somebody experiences some kind of a heartbreak or a death, and I'm telling you, it will happen. If it hasn't happened in your life yet, it will at some point happen. The question is, how will you respond to that? If we're not prepared to live by faith, if we're not prepared to trust God, if we're not prepared to say that I believe the words of God, I believe the words of Christ, I believe that what He says is true, He is just, He is righteous, He is faithful, then we will never be prepared. If we can't do that, if we can't walk by faith, we will never be prepared for the next tragedy. Mark my words. So as Christians, we have a responsibility not only to live out our faith and to stay focused on that goal, but to teach other people to do likewise. And I promise you, when you do that, life is a whole lot less complicated. Doesn't mean that the tragedies are going to be wiped out. It just means your path gets a whole lot straighter when you're letting God guide you. That's your message for today. I just encourage you to go out and find ways to live out your faith this week. Talk to people, share with people, pray with people. Talk to people who are struggling. Don't sprinkle cliches on them and tell them everything's going to be great. Listen to them. Share life with them. Live out your faith. If anybody's not yet taken the step to put Christ on in baptism and you're ready, we